I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're speaking with Sidney Phelps Little. He is a masterful storyteller who paints a vivid and historically grounded tapestry in his latest novel, Caleb's Journey. Through the lens of a simple man named Caleb, the author offers readers an immersive glimpse into a turbulent era in Jerusalem, punctuated by faith, war, and the profound challenges of the early Christians. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank our team at City of Books for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and purchasing this wonderful book, Caleb's Journey. Sidney, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
I'm glad to be here and glad to be able to talk about my book.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. This is quite a book. You have really created a unique world within the pages of this book, which I think is the goal of most authors. Let's give the folks at home a big picture. What is Caleb's Journey all about?
Well, let me ask you a question to start it off. Have you ever wished that you were at a place in time where history was made? And that is to have an actual personal relationship with those who were making history. Jesus Christ made the biggest change in history since the beginning of time. And so I tried to bring out in the book and introduce the reader to Christ and to his death, resurrection, so that others can come to believe in him. Also, I have tried to take it one step further by going into the other historical event, which was the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD by the Roman army. There was what was called the Jewish-Roman Wars, and they were a horrific scene that killed many, many people. Many died. And at the end of that war, many of the Jews were put into slavery and sent to Rome. And as a matter of fact, many of them helped build the great Colosseum in Rome. So I wrote it in first person for the very reason that I thought maybe people would have a better vision through my eyes or the eyes of Caleb, who happened to be my alter ego as I wrote this. And those were the efforts that I tried to make in bringing a reality to the story. Rather than telling the story, I tried to live through the story.
Wonderful. So what you've tried to do is bring to life basically Christian history through the character of Caleb, who is basically the vicarious reader in a way, and blending a little fact or a lot of fact with some fiction in order to create this narrative, right?
Right. Well, there weren't very many writers back in that time that recorded the war. One of the main characters was Josephus, which had written much of Jewish history, and he also wrote of the Jewish wars. So in reading his history and doing a lot of research on my own in libraries and online, I was able to get a pretty good picture of the death and destruction of the war itself. Many, many, many people perished because of this war. The Romans brought in over 4 legions to attack the city. And at the time that attack took place, there was a big civil war going on within the walls of Jerusalem. And when they weren't battling amongst themselves, they turned and fought the Romans. And Caleb was living in the city and knew that destruction was coming, hunger was coming. So he and 30 others escaped the city and went out to live in a town of peace. It's sort of a dichotomy that I tried to bring out. There was a peaceful region and there was a warlike region. So I tried to bring those two together in what it was like to live in peace versus what it was like to live in war.
Was this an era you were well acquainted with before you started writing this book, or is this something you needed to research in order to do your writing?
I would say it was a little bit of both. I have been a student of the Bible for many years. I've taught adult Sunday school for about 20 years and led a small Bible study group. So I have read a lot around it, but it also took an awful lot of research to come up with the actual telling of the story. The route of the Romans as they went through the first Western Wall into a second wall, then into Fortress Antonio, and finally into the court of the Gentiles, and eventually to destroy the temple itself. There were a couple of generals involved. General Titus was the son of Vespasian, who had started the war and was marching on Jerusalem, but was called back to Rome because Rome itself was going through a civil war, and he became the Roman emperor. And so he turned it over to his son Titus. Titus, as far as I could tell, did not want to destroy the temple. He did everything he could to prevent it, but the soldiers under the four legions were so incensed by the war that they tore it down. They burned it. And as it burned, there was a lot of the precious metals that went into the cracks of the street and the walls. So they took pry bars and literally tore it apart to get to the precious metals. It's an interesting story and an interesting time.
Absolutely. What do you hope readers take away from your book when it comes to
First of all, I wrote it because I want people to understand and believe that Jesus Christ lived, he died, and was resurrected. I want people to come to believe that. And secondly, I want people to understand that there is a horror to war, even 2,000 years ago as to even today, that people die needlessly. So those are the main story points that I'm trying to get across to the reader.
Have you thought about your book perhaps as a movie or a series, perhaps, to get the people who aren't part of the reading public to at least watch and understand and appreciate what you've created?
Well, I've thought about it. I haven't really sat down and taken the time with it. I probably should. I had written the book a number of years ago, but I continually study the time and the place, and I tried to put together maybe some different stories around it, but I haven't been able to come up with something that has satisfied my own mind. But as I said, I think writing it in first person is more important than third person because it puts the individual reading the text in the story themselves.
Yeah. It has that feeling of realism where it's a first person account as opposed to an omniscient narrator or something like that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So as the story goes, it tells, I think, of the total destruction and depravity of people. Jerusalem at that time, as it was being in a civil war, was run by three different factions trying to take over the control of the city. If you look back in history, Rome had been in control of Jerusalem up until about 50 years after the death of Christ. And then they were pushed out by the Jews and the gates locked, and they kept trying to get back in. So there was a lot of infighting over the years. But finally, Rome gave up and said, this is the end. We're going to take over the city and bring them under our rule once again. And that's where the war started.
Well, Sidney, you've put together quite a book. It is called Caleb's Journey. It takes a look through the lens of a simple man named Caleb. The author offers readers an immersive glimpse into a turbulent era in Jerusalem, punctuated by faith, war, and the profound challenges of that early Christian community. Sidney, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Okay, I appreciate having the opportunity to talk about the book, and I believe people, whether Christian or not, will enjoy reading it because it isn't only about faith; it is also about war and peace.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating tale, no matter what your religion is. It's an interesting story for sure. It's available everywhere books are sold, including Amazon. The links are below this interview. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time. This time, until next time on Spotlight.
Okay, thank you very much for the interview.